Cheese, you all right, man? Help! Help me, somebody! Help, please! Oh!
The movie starts with Cochise arriving at his friend Preach's house announcing it's time for school. During class, Preach decides to try to get out of class by acting like another student's nose is bleeding, and Cochise sneaks out behind him. We see the boys hop onto the back of a city bus and leave school. They end up at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. Preach acts like he's buying a hot dog while the other boys steal some snacks from the cart. Then they take off running. In another part of the zoo, the boys head over to the monkey and gorilla enclosure and start feeding the animals. One of them ends up getting nailed with a handful of gorilla poop. After that, they leave the zoo and hop on a train without paying, of course. They're trying to make it back to school before last period so nobody realizes they've been gone all day. On the way, they run into a classmate who tells them an upcoming test got pushed from Friday to Monday because they weren't in school. Now, they've got to study for a test that's about to be sooner than they expected. The boys end up at a place called Martha's, where Cochise starts shooting dice. Preach jumps in too, but they're interrupted by a light-skinned woman who asks them to move so she can use the bathroom. Of course, Preach immediately sets his sights on her, and not long after, he gets kicked out for being underage and gambling. Sometime later, Preach and Cochise are making out with two women who refuse to give up the goods. Cochise and his girl keep kissing, but the woman with Preach isn't interested, so he decides to walk her home instead. Later, back at Cochise's house, he's looking for a letter. His mom tells him if it isn't in the stack of mail, then it isn't there. Turns out the baby got a hold of it and dipped it in a dirty toilet. He opens the soaked letter anyway and finds out he just got a scholarship and accepted to college. Later that night, the boys are walking around looking for somewhere to drink. They start clowning Preach for wanting to become a Hollywood writer, reading his poetry out loud and talking down to him. Preach gets fed up and tries to fight one of them, but the others break it up. He snaps and tells them they're a bunch of useless ninjas who will never amount to anything. Ooh, drama. The boys show up at a house party and finesse the women at the door. A bunch of girls immediately run over wanting to dance with Cochise, but he turns them all down. Preach spots the light-skinned woman from earlier. Her name is Brenda, and she makes it very clear she wants him to leave her alone and learn what the word no means. Meanwhile, Cochise notices a girl sitting on the couch and immediately puts on a slow record, so he has an excuse to dance with her. It's a super cringe flirting scene. Sometime later, Preach gets another chance to talk with Brenda, and this time they end up bonding over their shared love of poetry. Meanwhile, Cochise is making out with the girl from earlier when her boyfriend suddenly shows up looking for a fight. The girl running the party tells them to take it outside, but punches start flying anyway. The fight tears up the entire house, then everybody just leaves. Just ridiculous, immature, and inconsiderate. Later, Preach and Cochise get picked up by a couple of guys in a car. They ask Preach if he wants to drive, and he says yes, despite never driving a day in his life. They have to explain how to start the car and even the difference between drive and reverse. Eventually, he gets the car moving. Then a police car pulls up right beside them. A high-speed chase breaks out. Anyway, they somehow escape the police in one of the most unrealistic ways possible. Just pure foolishness and shenanigans. Not long after, Preach slams into a parked car. All four of them immediately bail out and run. The people in the other car start screaming about whiplash, and the police arrive to help but are annoyed the boys managed to get away. The next day, the boys are over at a friend's house supposedly studying. Eventually, they leave and decide they want to go to the movies, but only four of them have enough money for tickets. Then Cochise says one person has to stay behind and immediately looks at the light-skinned friend, even though he's one of the people who actually has money. The guy says if he isn't going, then nobody is going. Like, what is their problem with him? Later, Cochise and Preach start talking to two prostitutes. When it's time to pay, Preach suddenly pretends to be a police officer and tells them they're under arrest. The women panic and end up bribing them with $10 before realizing they've been played. The boys eventually make it to the movies to watch Godzilla. More kissing and stuff follows. Then two gangs randomly start fighting inside the theater over absolutely nothing. Just useless. Sometime later, Preach and Brenda are hanging out together. They seem pretty close now. They end up alone at someone's house making out. Eventually, they start taking their clothes off. Brenda tells him she's ready and admits she's still a virgin. The two end up sleeping together. Not a condom in sight. Afterward, they're joking around until Preach says,
"Oh, boy. Wait until I tell Cochise I won. That nigga owes me $1, babe."
Of course, Brenda gets upset. Then Preach's little sisters walk into the room while Brenda is getting dressed and immediately say they're telling their mama. Honestly, he's an idiot, and this is example number 1022 of why you can't trust these boys. The next day at school, Preach sees Brenda, who's still upset with him, rightfully so. He claims he blacked out and doesn't even remember saying whatever made her mad, and then asked her to forgive him. Right then, his girlfriend walks over. Brenda kisses Preach and says, "That's for yesterday." Then the girlfriend walks up asking, "What's that about?" Honestly, everybody in this movie is trash. A little later, the teacher confronts the boys about constantly skipping school. Then right in the middle of the class, the police walk in. They announce they're arresting Preach and Cochise for grand theft auto. The teacher pulls the officers aside at the police station and asks them to reduce or drop the charges because the boys are good kids. Somehow it actually works. Meanwhile, the other two boys become convinced Preach and Cochise must have snitched on them. Preach goes home after being released from the jail, and his mom finally gets back after working 3 jobs. She says she can't trust him anymore and tells him to go get the belt because she's about to whip his ass for riding around in stolen cars and having naked girls in her house while she's gone. She tells him she's tired of his mess. Preach comes back and says maybe he should just leave since he's almost 18 years old anyways, but she fell asleep before he could tell her. The next day at school, the other boys turn on Preach and Cochise. They call them snitches and blame them for the others ending up in jail. Later, Preach is in the bathroom trying to pee when Mr. Mason, the teacher who helped get them out of jail, clears everybody out so they can talk. He tells Preach he has a lot of potential and hates seeing him wasted. Mr. Mason, obviously over his shit, finally tells him the truth, that he was the one who convinced the police to let them go. Preach immediately runs off to go tell Cochise. Instead, he finds Cochise with his ex-girlfriend while she's getting dressed. Of course, he gets mad and tries to fight him, but gets held back. I don't even know why he's mad. He cheated on her with Brenda earlier. Just a mess. Back at Martha's, Preach sees Brenda and tries to talk to her. Right then, the 2 guys who went to jail walk in. Preach tries to leave before they spot him. He explains that Mr. Mason was the one who got them released and that nobody snitched. They don't care. Instead, they chase him down anyway, threatening to beat him up. Preach ducks into the bathroom trying to escape, but the woman inside is telling him to get out. Then Martha comes in carrying a butcher knife and tells everybody to leave. Sometime later, the boys finally catch up with Cochise and beat him badly. Preach eventually finds him lying on the ground where they left him. He screams for help, but his voice is drowned out by a passing train. We learn Cochise died from his injuries. Preach attends his funeral, so much for a friendship. You know what? I knew somebody was gonna die, and of course it's the one who got into college. Figures. After everyone leaves, Preach walks up to Cochise's casket alone. He pours a little liquor onto it and says his final goodbyes. The movie ends by showing what happened to everyone afterward. Preach eventually made it to Hollywood and became a successful screenwriter. The 2 men responsible for Cochise's death were both killed in 1966 during a gas station holdup. Brenda became a librarian, got married, and had 3 children. Pooter, the light-skinned friend, became a factory worker in Indiana. And that's the end of this movie. Here are my final thoughts. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. When I watched this movie, I was thinking the entire time, what is the plot? And then I started to realize that maybe this was written as a biopic because there is no goal, there is no nothing. And then at the end, Cochise dies, and I was like, oh, is this where Boys in the Hood got that the guy that was going to college is gonna die? Did they steal this from this movie? And it had me thinking that movies like Cooley High had to walk in order for movies like Boys in the Hood to run, okay? Of course, the scene in Boys in the Hood when Ricky passed away was a lot more traumatic than Cooley High when Cochise passed away. But I just knew the entire time, I was like, somebody has to die in this movie. Something tragic's gonna happen. I just am not sure what exactly is going to happen. Of course, there's a couple heavy hitters in this movie. Glenn Turman, who played Preach, I've seen him in A Different World and other TV shows. Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs, who played Cochise, I've seen him in other shows as well. But the real heavy hitter for me was Garrett Morris, who played Mr. Mason, because I remember him from Jamie Foxx show and several other like black TV shows that have come out more recently. So for me, he was like this real superstar in this movie because I'm like, oh, I know exactly who he is. So I feel like these were like some of their beginner roles. And I think everybody did a good job in the acting and all that. It's just that like there was no set goal. This was kind of like the movie Stand By Me with the little white boys that run around and find the dead body and stuff like that out in the country. Except for this was in Chicago. So overall, I think they did a pretty good job with the movie. I'm sure at the time that this movie was created, the other black movies were more about like exploiting black culture, and maybe they wanted a more feel good, this is everyday life for Black Boys in the Hood / projects type movie. And I can see where they were going with that, but there was no clear set goal. You know, Coach Cheese got into college, of course, and got a scholarship. I don't know how, because he was a truant that was flunking. Everybody had their own little issues. Preach was chasing women and getting no play, but his friend Cochise was like the pretty boy of the group. And then of course there's the whole light skin trope. The light skinned woman is the prize or the romantic interest, and the light skinned guy is not even looked at by the other women. I hate that trope, honestly. It's interesting to see that even in 1975 these same type of tropes were going on. And maybe this was real life back then. I remember back in the 90s when, you know, How to Be a Player came out and the light-skinned dude got no play and Bill Bellamy was getting all the play with all the girls and stuff. And I was just like, you know, maybe that's exactly what's going on with this movie as well. But overall, I don't know. I would not watch this movie again. I give it a 5 out of 10. I think this is great for some people and probably was great for the time. But for me, I just needed more of a plot, a goal. Or maybe if I knew it was a biopic before I watched it, it wouldn't have been as bad. But thank you guys for watching. I'm not sure what the next recap will be. I've kind of just been playing by ear and just choosing random movies that seem interesting. But I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye!